Welcome into another edition of Tampa 2. Casey Phillips here with staff writer Brianna Dix. And most importantly, this is the playoff edition of Tampa 2. The best kind
wild card weekend
of edition. Oh my gosh, this is just going to be so exciting. It's a home game. And right before we recorded this, we actually went out. There was the Raise the Flags rally that happened outside of the stadium. And
Lovely,
it was
nice.
Incredible.
Day.
You know what? And this is what I love. There was actually a woman who pulled up in her car and she said, "Rain or shine, baby, who cares?" And I loved that. Bucs fans are feeling it. They are ready as the Eagles come into town and to host them. And it was so cool. Everyone is honking their horns and waving their flags and going nuts. Just so cool.
Energy's high.
The energy's high. The vibes are good, man. And so I'm very excited about it. And I just want to start with this before we get into our normal, regularly scheduled programming of Tampa 2. So I just want to throw out there, the Bucs say they lose Tom Brady. They have $80 million in dead cap space. Everyone and their mother out there was picking them to finish second to last in the whole league. I just want to revel in that. I think that the football season can be long.
We kept receipts.
We
if anyone's
forget.
wondering.
Exactly. We forget. And so instead of everyone picking us to finish 31st in the league, instead you have a winning record, third division title in a row, first time in team history. And to make the playoffs 4 years in a row, that is hard to do. I don't care how you do it.
For any franchise, right.
I don't care what happens. So I just feel like as Bucs fans, everyone can just take a moment and have some enjoyment of, even if it wasn't the prettiest last game in Carolina or the way you got in, it doesn't matter, especially compared to everything that was stacked against you. That $80 million in dead cap money, I just don't think we talk about that enough.
Yes.
It is incredible. I think Scott Smith phrased it this way on our show of it's basically like fighting with one arm tied behind your back. And yet getting to the 12th round of a boxing match and winning with one arm tied around your back. And I just thought that was so great.
At the outset, if we would have thought that they would have been able to re-sign Jamel Dean and Anthony Nelson and Levante David, no one would have believed it, but somehow we managed.
Even with all that dead cap money to keep a lot of key people. So anyways, just felt like going on that little bit of a soapbox moment to start, set our tone. These are how we feel. These are our vibes right now, and it's good. So with that said, let's go ahead and look a little bit back at that Carolina game before diving into this Eagles matchup. What were some of your big takeaways?
It wasn't exactly the prettiest victory, but it was a win, and they ended up, they made less mistakes, I think, as players and coaches kind of reiterated this week. Offensively, obviously wasn't the smoothest game, kind of really couldn't get into a groove or get that continuity going. They were able to kind of wear down Panthers defense throughout the game, getting the yards on the ground. But really the defense, and then shout out to Chase McLaughlin, 3 of 3, solely had the Bucs 9 points on the board. But just what a game from Antoine Winfield Jr. He kind of became the catalyst. And I think even though he maybe wouldn't say that Pro Bowl snub gave him a little chip on his shoulder, as he is racing across the width of that field as DJ Chark was going in for the touchdown, extends the arm, and Winfield just comes out of nowhere like a man possessed, knocks it out before he crosses the pylon, saves a touchdown, because then that would have, I think, changed the entire complexion of that game. The Panthers would have gone up 7-3, but instead, Jamel Dean recovered it for the touchback, and then you had Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who had the strip sack. Greg Gaines recovered it. You had Antoine Winfield Jr. getting a sack. You had Yaya Diaby getting a sack in the first quarter, which just props to Todd Bowles, man. Just the pressure package of that. They lined up Vita Vea as a defensive end, crashed him inside. Yaya looped around, got Bryce Young down. Just things like that I think was just exciting to see the momentum that defense was playing with. And I think that's going to be really important heading into this game against the Eagles, who might not necessarily look as great on paper right now, but this is still a very, very talented team.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I loved seeing just how much Baker gutted it out. That's the kind of thing that gets the rest of your team fired up. I mean, that third down run that he got while he's limping and he's got the ribs and everything. I'm like, oh my, first of all, I at the moment he started running, I was like, no, terrified.
No.
And then he gets it. I'm like, yes. But it's like, man, this is who he is. That he's this guy who
he's going to put it all out there.
It doesn't matter. He's going to do exactly what it takes.
Yeah.
And when you get to the playoffs, that's exactly who you want. That banged up or not, he is going to try to get it done. Again, it may or may not be pretty, but he's going to do whatever it takes to get it done. And again, I think that what is so tough is just the slow starts continuing on offense. It's so hard to do what you want to do offensively when
you're playing
from behind. It's just really challenging. So they started, 1 of 5 on third down, 4 straight punts. to still come out with a win, A, props to the defense,
Yes.
but B, that's still amazing that, you know, it's just, it's something we've seen. We saw that now they finished the regular season without an opening drive touchdown. And that's a tough way to do it. So again, to have a winning record, to be in the playoffs when that's the case, speaks so much to the grit, the determination. They don't give up, you know, being able to make adjustments as well.
Right.
I think it speaks highly of Coach Canales to be able to, hey, you know what, whatever we were doing early wasn't working. We're going to adjust and we're going to get it figured out. And I think same thing of trying to get Mike involved earlier, that we saw the effort there, that he got a couple catches in that first drive, then just nothing. It was 0 for 5 the next times you targeted him, didn't get another catch till the fourth quarter. I just think that's going to be challenging if that's your, you know, your MVP basically of your offense in so many ways, to try to need to be able to get him going a little bit more earlier. And then, of course, I want to shout out Chris Godwin. Went over 1,000 yards receiving for the 4th time in his career, breaking a tie with Joey Galloway and Vincent Jackson, R.I.P., loved Vincent for sure, for the second most 1,000-yard receiving seasons in franchise history, trailing only, of course, Mike Evans. 4th time in 5 years, he and Evans have both hit 1,000 yards in the same season. That's not easy to do. And I think that it speaks, again, a lot to Canales finding ways to use him in this offense, where sometimes he was outside, sometimes he was in the slot, sometimes he was here and there, and knowing that whatever it took, even when it felt like maybe Chris wasn't having quite as big a season, to find out now he still did hit 1,000 yards, shows how much he is just that consistent presence. May not always get the glory, glamorous type of stuff, but he's just there and gritty and doing the dirty work. Yeah, third downs, key situations.
He's the guy.
He's the guy. And then, and defensively, man, first shutout since 2010. Yeah. Shutouts in the NFL are hard.
Yes.
They are rare.
I mean, held Carolina to 2 of 12 on 3rd down.
That's
2 of 12.
Wow. And how demoralizing for an offense, like, and how great for defense to be getting off the field so consistently. I think that's an incredible thing. Antoine, I mean, we could talk about him forever, of course. I also love that he got his 6th sack of the season. And that one, I just feel like in general, we should talk about the fact that Antoine can single-handedly stop points. That, of course, there was his forced fumble play, but that sack pushed them back 9 yards, which is then when they missed that field goal. You could say that Antoine is why they missed that field goal.
Yes.
Because it looked to me...
He changed the course of the game.
Yeah, if it was 9 yards closer, that might go in. That he didn't miss it by much.
Right. And
so those 2 plays alone might have saved 10 points, which guess what? Bucs had 9. That's the game. Yeah, it's amazing what he's able to do. And then Yaya Diaby, 7.5 sacks on the season, leading the team, second most of all rookies, and ties Adrian Claiborne for second most by a rookie in team history. And I'm so happy for him. He's such a great guy. And I loved hearing this week that Levante was making sure to tell all these rookies, like, don't you dare take this for granted that you're getting to go to the playoffs as a rookie.
This is what I dealt with. This is my road.
I feel like Levante was the guy that was going, I walked uphill to school both ways in the snow, like, you know. And he's telling all these rookies, like, hey, don't take it for granted. And you can tell Yaya has not taken anything for granted. He's been ready when his number's been called. And it's so cool to watch him grow in this defense where he's always had the physical tools, and it feels like you can really see that the mental side and the understanding of the game is picking up a lot, and I just think that's great. And then, Chase McLaughlin, 57-yard field goal that tied his season and career long, his third 57-yarder in 3 tries this season, all of them tied for the 5th longest in team history. That is a big deal, especially as we look forward to the Eagles game, knowing that they're a hard team to move the ball against in a lot of ways. They've got a heck of a defensive front. If you can just know that you can cross midfield, get anywhere close to field goal range, you feel so much better about being able to get some points. Of course, they're always going to want to go for 7. But at least if you feel like, you know what, with Chase McLaughlin, like, we feel like we almost have guaranteed points if we get anywhere close. That's got to be really encouraging, that with your offense, even if it's struggling a little bit, stalling a bit, to feel like you're not getting left with 0 as often. So let's dive into the injury report. This is going to be a big thing for both teams this week.
So definitely the main thing to watch is quarterback Baker Mayfield, who, of course, is dealing with the ribs injury, the ankle injury. And again, we're filming this on Friday, which is a normal Thursday schedule, with it being Monday Night Football. And
so we have even less injury info than we normally do.
But it was a practice estimation because the Buccaneers went through a walkthrough on Thursday, so he did not practice and didn't go through that. So that will certainly be something to look out for this weekend as well. Tristan Wirfs was dealing with an illness, and he did not participate in the walkthrough as well.
Yes.
So those will definitely have everyone's eyes as we
get
closer to Monday night.
We typically only kind of go over the Bucs injury report, but I do feel like this week, we have to talk about the Eagles a little bit. So A.J. Brown did not participate. Now, again, it's going to be a lot like the Bucs in terms of on this, what would be a normal Wednesday.
Right.
It's fair to say that they're going to rest and be precautious.
Playoffs, high-stakes matchup.
You have the extra day. So it may mean a little less in that sense, but still, A.J. Brown did not participate, and of course, Jalen Hurts was limited with that finger. Now, I will say that Devontae Smith was full participant, and that one I feel like is interesting because we weren't really sure after their last game. So the fact that he already on Wednesday was full means he's probably going to be just fine. So it is mainly that A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts one that's going to be really interesting to watch. So based on looking at those kind of things, especially with knowing Baker's situation and not knowing how he's going to be, let's talk about some of these one-on-one matchups. How about for the Bucs offense? What are you looking at?
For the one-on-ones, I'm going with Mike Evans against Darius Slay, and then Vita Vea against Jason Kelce. I am so ready for this. So for Mike Evans, so Philadelphia's pass defense has really struggled this year. They rank second to last in the NFL in passing yards surrendered, 252.7. And then the Eagles DBs have allowed a 101.4 rate allowed to wide receivers, which is 29th in the NFL. I think this wild card matchup could really create some opportunities for Mike Evans. And if he is isolated in man coverage, they're going to take that shot all day long. I mean, Mike Evans has just kind of become Baker Mayfield's go-to threat downfield this year, has that kind of larger frame to box out DBs. He's a cheat code on the back shoulder throws. I think he doesn't really get enough credit for his route running ability. He's so physical at the releases. The way he baits guys with his stem. I mean, just all throughout, what a season he's had. And, of course, just the accolades just speak for themselves. And then Darius Slay is obviously a guy for Philadelphia that's kind of been on the injury report, missed 4 games with the knee injury. But I think there's optimism in Philly that he will be able to make an appearance in this game. And he's a guy that just kind of plays through, the hands of the receivers, really physical, kind of is able to disrupt the tempo of guys' routes. So I think that's going to be a really critical matchup. And then, man, Jason Kelce, Vita Vea, to be honest, it doesn't get any better than that. I mean, you have Vita Vea, just the Bucs' menacing nose tackle that just routinely commands double teams, so strong at the point of attack, just overwhelms centers and guards. And then Jason Kelce, the Eagles' run game runs through him, whether it's the seal blocks, whether it's the pulls, just his athleticism, his ability to dislodge guys, get to the second level. So athletic, probably one of the most, if not the most athletic center in the NFL. So that's going to be, I think, a big emphasis and a critical matchup this week to see kind of how those lines dictate the pace of the game. Yeah,
I think for me, essentially, the one-on-one, the position group, the keys to the game.
Yeah, they're really all kind of hand in hand.
All the same.
Yes.
It's the run game in general. So for, of course, my one-on-ones, I chose Rachaad White versus Fletcher Cox. And I chose Vita Vea versus, and I said Jason Kelce, and then I said / DeAndre Swift. Because I had a feeling you were going to pick Vita versus Jason Kelce. But also, again, it's versus DeAndre Swift in there as well.
Everyone. Yeah, all the above.
Yeah, so that's basically my one-on-ones. And then my position group, I was just both lines, all the interior people. Especially because when you look at the last game, we had 41 rushing yards. They had 201.
Yep.
That is rough.
Yeah.
That is going to make it dang near impossible to win. It's after, we talk about how an indicator for any game is the turnover margin, right? Who wins the turnover battle is the single biggest stat typically that predicts wins. But I think rushing yards like that, it's twofold, right? That there's the chicken or egg situation of you're ahead, so you're able to run more to run off the clock, so you end up with more stats. But also, if you can impose your will on the run game first, that is going to make a huge difference because it just makes everything easier. So also knowing that for your rush defense, Jalen Hurts' finger is hurt, probably not going to want to throw as much as usual. So can you contain him in the run game? Can you contain DeAndre Swift? All that's going to be so important. And then, look, we know they are real good in those short yardage situations. They bring in that tush-push, brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. Both names are great. Now, I will say, part of the one-on-one, when we pick Vita, if I'm going to send anyone that I feel good against a tush-push, it's going to be Mr. Vita.
Yeah.
That feels like a perfect person to have in there to try to stop that.
1,000%.
But you know that if you let them get to 3rd and 1 or 2, 4th and 1 or 2, they are going to convert that so often.
Yeah.
So the key is, can you on those early downs, especially those early runs, keep them from even getting to those short yardage situations, trying to make sure that you're keeping them at 3rd and 4, 5, 6, things like that, so that that tush-push play isn't as available, is going to be absolutely huge. So it's your run defense, especially in those early downs. Don't even let them get to that point. And knowing that, especially that Saints game, we sort of got out-physicaled. And this is an Eagles team that's going to try to do that to you as well. So can you impose your will on both sides of the ball with the line? Because that's really going to disrupt, I think, a lot of what they want to do. And then same thing, you don't want to make, the same way that they're not going to want to make Jalen Hurts do as much, you're not going to want to make Baker do as much. So it's interesting, the parallels between these two teams right now.
Very similar.
It's going to be, they're going to both be trying to do the same thing and stopping the same thing. So I think that's going to be really interesting. How about you? With your position groups are the same?
Yes. Yeah, I went with, and I left this quote from Todd Bowles, but he said, "We have to play better. They beat us on both sides of the ball, up front and in trenches," which was week 3. They won the ball game. For us to win this ball game, we've got to win in the trenches. And I think that is just very overarching of all of it, offense, defensive line, how they're able to control, whether it's for the Bucs offensive line, being able to get some push in the run game, keeping Baker Mayfield upright with the injuries that he's dealing with, giving him time to go through his progressions, his reads, but then also defensively just being able to get pressure on Jalen Hurts, but also just being disciplined in run fits, whether it's against DeAndre Swift, whether it's against Jalen Hurts, because he is a guy that he might be trying to do more. They haven't done as many design runs with him this year because obviously their offense is predicated on the run, whether it's the having Jalen Hurts in the shotgun, whether it's the RPOs, whether it's the spread, all of that works together. But when he's dealing with all these injuries, he might be more tempted to just take off running. And he's a guy that is very elusive when he does break contain. So how are they able to handle him and corral him? Because if you over pursue, if you don't take the right angle, he's going to exploit you all day long.
For sure.
So that, and then obviously just with their defensive line, I mean, a guy like Hassan Reddick, 11 sacks this year, rare closing burst, just absolutely lethal out of his 2-point stance with his forward lean, just ability to wreak havoc. So how we're able to hold up against that.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about our quote of the week.
Yes. I went with a kind of more of an X's and O's one this week with a quote from Todd Bowles on Jalen Hurts. And he said, he gets his runs in, but it's the passing runs that kill you when they rush 4. He's so athletic, he gets outside the pocket anyway when you have 4, and you try to rush him normally. When you send 5 and he makes somebody miss, he gets up through the hole. That's going to be a real concentration point because I don't see anybody that has really stopped it. We just have to try and limit it from being 30, 40, 50-yard gains and try to keep it to 6, 7, or 8, hopefully.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's very true. We talk about that, especially, again, with his finger being hurt. I can see Jalen really trying to extend plays with his legs instead.
Right. Well, and even with the Panthers, with Chuba Hubbard, he finished with over 100 scrimmage yards, and I feel like they really tried to, attack the edges, running him away from Vita Vea. So they were using a lot of, him through the C and D gaps to try and force the Bucs corner safeties to come up to fill those gaps. And that could be something that, Philly tries to do, whether it's with Jalen Hurts, whether it's with DeAndre Swift. So how are the Bucs able to counter that? Because the run defense has been the Bucs' calling card for so many years, and they've been really, really good at it this season. There's been kind of some drops here and there where things have lagged or there's been some missed tackles or whatever. But this is the week that the margin of error is very slim, and you have to be able to stop it, because if not, that's going to get demoralizing. But they're going to start carving it up with, those 3-yard runs that later turn into 7, 9, 10.
Yep, I completely agree. So for my quote, I went with Baker talking about how different things feel compared to their last matchup against the Eagles. He said, we were really trying to find ourselves at that point in the season, trying to figure out who we were going to be, especially offensively. I think we've kind of realized what we're good at and the bread and butter for us. Also, they've changed on defense. They've had some injuries, a different play caller now for them as well. Matt Patricia's calling it. A little bit of different variabilities, but we've got to handle it, got to prepare. Luckily, we've had 4 games where he's been calling the games. We've got to key into that and figure out what his go-to is. We're just different in the sense that we've been more foundationally better within the run game, knowing what we're good at scheme-wise. We've just got to get the pass game back going again. So it is cool to hear that of how he really feels and sees progress in the offense since then. But it is also important to remember that, yeah, as he put it, it's a whole different person calling the defense for the Eagles than the last time we played them. So it is not going to be a similar, exact situation. Right. But as he said, they've had 4 games to kind of study it, look at it, see what he's doing. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how, both of these teams are different in some good, some bad in terms of injuries or, what they've had going on. We know the Eagles have had a rough end of the season, but either way, these two teams are not the same as that first matchup. So as much as that one didn't go the Bucs' way, I personally feel a lot better about this one than that last matchup, knowing how much this offense has been able to grow since week 3. All right, so we will close with our sort of human interest piece, the off-the-field story that I like to share with everybody. So I figured because of Washington being in the national championship game this week, of course, we would talk about the fact that, of course, there's about a billion Buccaneers who went there. You have, Kate Otten, Joe Trauschenka, Greg Gaines, Vita, all of them, which I think is incredible that here we are basically, us and the Dolphins are like the farthest away teams from there. And we shows our scouts.
Yeah, we're just like a clinic.
Our scouts will go as far as it takes to find us some good players. But also I thought this was pretty cool. So Kate Otten, he is from the state of Washington. So his dad and grandfather coached his team in high school. And his grandfather retired as Washington's winningest high school coach. And I'm like, man, no wonder he's good. And, of course, now his younger brother is playing at Washington as well. So a whole little pipeline going through there. But I really love that idea of his family and the legacy that they have and that, football has always much been in his blood. That's been such a big part of the family there. So I just thought that was a really cool little fun fact about Cade and his family and all the football there. So, all right, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Tampa 2. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy that playoff game and stay tuned to all the coverage of it on Buccaneers.com.